My sister banned me from her wedding, even though she celebrated at mine. All our friends and family were there, except me. My parents fully supported her decision. I didn't cry. I did this. 2 hours later, she called me in tears because, as the oldest, I was the built-in caretaker for my sister Kelly from the time we were little. My parents expected me to clean up after her, help with homework, walk her home after school, and play with her because they didn't have the time or energy after work. Some nights Mom would come in, drop her bag with a sigh, say she had nothing left to give, and ask me to read Kelly a bedtime story. Kelly didn't make any of it easier. She said mean things and had no real idea how to behave around people. She'd blurt out whatever crossed her mind, and somehow I was always the one who had to deal with the fallout. Take the time she tagged along to my best friend Mia's 13th birthday. We all brought small presents we'd bought with our allowance, and my friend was thrilled. Then she opened the gift from her grandparents, a Barbie dollhouse. Sure, we were a bit old for Barbie, but my friend clearly loved it and even got a little misty. Out of nowhere, Kelly started giggling and, when everyone looked her way, announced it was a stupid gift. I stared at my friend in horror. She looked stung by my sister's words, and Kelly just kept on giggling. I apologized to the birthday girl and said I'd take Kelly home. I was mortified by my sister's behavior, rude for no reason. Back at the house, I asked Kelly why she'd done that. She just smiled and said she'd only said out loud what everyone else was thinking, and it wasn't her fault if my friend got offended. I was furious and disappointed. Later, when I told our parents, hoping they'd explain she was out of line, they lectured me instead about being a good sister. I shouldn't be ashamed of Kelly in front of other people, they said, and maybe I should stop being friends with anyone who can't handle the truth. Looking back, I see it for what it was. They were gaslighting me so I'd keep taking care of my sister while she got away with whatever she wanted. As I got older, I started pushing back and setting boundaries whenever my parents tried to force me to watch Kelly or bring her along to hangouts. I told them, plainly, that Kelly could spend time with her own friends, or they could keep an eye on her themselves, because I needed time for my own life. They accused me of trying to exclude her and said I was a bad sister since Kelly didn't have friends. It was true she didn't, but that was entirely on her. She was rude to everyone under the banner of honesty, and people got hurt. Because of that, Kelly often sat alone at lunch. No one wanted to sit with her, and my parents made me put her at my table. I hated it. After enough parental lectures, I finally caved and let Kelly join me and my friends. Then I went to college, and that's when I finally felt real freedom. At first, my parents wanted me at a school close to home, but I worked hard and, thanks to a scholarship and a lucky break, got into a prestigious college a few 100 miles away on the East Coast. Mom begged me not to leave, said Kelly would miss me and I should be a good big sister. I didn't care. I moved into the dorms and felt so relieved to be away that I never came home for breaks or long weekends. It was the first time I could breathe without that smothering feeling. We had a Facebook group with my high school friends, and I'd added Kelly back when she used to tag along. In that group, she'd post now and then, asking if anyone wanted to meet up, but no one answered. Sure, some friends, like me, had moved to other cities for school, but a few stayed in our town, and even they didn't want to see her. I realized they'd only tolerated Kelly because my parents forced me to bring her. Once I wasn't around, there was no reason to keep humoring her. I didn't blame them. Kelly never stopped sniping and being honest, so I respected their choice. She kept posting in the group about getting together, and I even heard she called a few people. They made excuses or ignored her calls. Meanwhile, Kelly and I barely spoke. Our parents had always forced us together. I suspect she didn't like me any more than I liked being around her. When I left home, we almost stopped messaging entirely. Sometimes my parents called with updates about her life and urged me to visit and spend time with Kelly. I ignored it. Senior year, I came home because we had a high school reunion. I was excited to see everyone and catch up. When Kelly found out, she announced that she wanted to go too so she could hang out with my friends. This time, I told her firmly that these were my high school friends and she had no right to insert herself. My parents tried to argue, but I shut it down fast. Kelly needed to find her own friends and live her own life instead of trailing after me. We weren't kids anymore. I figured that settled it. At the reunion, I sank into the warm blur of nostalgia. We traded stories, remembered dumb pranks, and laughed over our old inside jokes. I was having a great time, right up until Kelly walked into the restaurant uninvited. I was stunned. I'd been crystal clear that I didn't want her involved, and she showed up anyway. Kelly came to our table and before I could say a word, chirped, "Oh, I missed you guys so much." The room went awkwardly quiet. People looked at me, then at her, confused. No one was expecting her. Oblivious to the discomfort, Kelly dragged over a chair and started chatting about how long it had been. I could feel my temper rising as I watched her brazenly insert herself into my circle at an event where she wasn't invited. My friends tried to be polite and keep the conversation going, but you could read the discomfort on their faces, and we couldn't talk freely anymore. After lunch, I pulled Kelly aside and asked her to go home. She waved me off, said it was no big deal and I needed to stop obsessing. These were her friends too. That breezy dismissal did it. I decided to teach her a lesson. We went back to the table and I addressed it in front of everyone so they could speak for themselves and so my sister would finally understand how embarrassing she was being. I asked whether anyone thought it was normal for a younger sister to crash our reunion without an invite. To my relief, several friends backed me up and told Kelly it made them uncomfortable. They weren't close with her. My best friend tried to soften it and told Kelly they could meet some other day, but tonight was for former classmates only. Hearing that, Kelly flushed, and I'll admit I felt a flicker of satisfaction watching her finally learn something about boundaries. She shot me a nasty look, clearly blaming me for the fiasco, and left with her head down. That night, when I got home from the reunion, my parents pounced on me, saying I'd humiliated Kelly in front of everyone and thrown her out. I told them no one wanted her there, that she crashed our event without an invitation and owed me an apology. They kept insisting she was my sister and I needed to be more understanding. Mom said Kelly always struggled to make friends. People didn't want to hang out with her, and she'd been excited to see my friends because they'd always been kind to her. I pushed back. I'd put up with Kelly for years, but those people were kind only because they were my friends, not hers, and they never actually wanted to spend time with her. Kelly must have overheard our argument. She stormed into the room and declared that everybody loved her, and I was the one trying to take her friends away. I actually laughed and said, if that's true, then why, all these years, has not a single one of my friends engaged with you when you posted in our group chat or called them? Kelly looked wounded and started making excuses, that everyone was just busy. I cut in. They were busy avoiding you because they're not your friends. Maybe that sounded harsh, but I wanted her to hear the truth. Dad started in about how selfish I was and how I owed Kelly an apology. I stood firm. She crossed a boundary by showing up where she wasn't invited. There were going to be consequences. That was the last straw. the final crack that broke whatever we had left. From then on, Kelly and I stopped talking and didn't even try to be polite at family gatherings. Years later, when I was getting married, my parents pushed me to invite her, saying Kelly would be devastated if I left her out, and they didn't want the rest of the family knowing about our rift. I sent the invitation reluctantly, and then they went further, pressuring me to make her a bridesmaid. That's where I drew the line and said I'd rescind her invite altogether if they kept pushing. Thankfully, my husband Mark is loving and steady. He understood the history with my sister and never pressed me to involve her in our wedding. Over time, I learned to be civil with Kelly, but closeness never returned. Now to the incident. Kelly got married last week. Her husband Jason is 15 years older. She met him while she was working at a restaurant. Kelly never stayed long in any job and kept telling our parents she just wanted to get married, so Jason showed up like a knight in shining armor, and she was thrilled to finally settle down. I heard about the wedding from cousins and from our parents. No surprise, I didn't get an invitation. Honestly, I didn't mind. We don't have a good relationship anyway. But to my surprise, Kelly sent electronic invitations to all my friends through that old Facebook group I'd added her to years ago. I'd practically forgotten the group existed. Nobody really uses Facebook anymore. I was stunned she invited my friends she doesn't even talk to. A few of them reached out to ask if I was going. I told them Kelly hadn't invited me. They were shocked she'd invited them but not me. I said I didn't care if they chose to attend. I have no relationship with her. Word must have spread because many others messaged me, outraged that she'd invite near strangers while excluding me, the person who used to look after her. I tried to make it clear I was fine with not being invited, but because Kelly publicly invited all my friends and not me, it felt to them like she was deliberately cutting me out. I brought it up with my parents and reminded them how they'd forced me to invite Kelly to my wedding for the family. Mom immediately defended her. The guest list was Kelly's decision and had nothing to do with them. Feeling betrayed, I pointed out that she invited all my friends, which left everyone wondering why she'd so pointedly erased me. As usual, my parents took her side and said those people were her friends too, and she'd be glad if they came. I realized there was no point talking to them and dropped it. On the day of my sister's wedding, I spent time with my husband and our son. Mark knew I was a little upset, so he drove us to the beach, and we had a great day. I turned my phone off. I like having no internet days when I'm with my family. When we got home, my phone lit up with messages and missed calls from my sister and my parents. Puzzled, I opened the latest text from Kelly with a photo attached. She wrote that it was all my fault, and she would never forgive me for ruining her wedding. The photo showed my friends. I gasped. They were wearing long, brightly colored dresses and looked absolutely ridiculous. One friend had a bright boa wrapped around her neck. Another wore a summer hat. For the record, a boa is a long, narrow scarf made of fur, feathers, or very light fabric, worn as a fashion accessory. I couldn't understand why anyone would dress like that for a wedding. It looked more like a silly costume contest than a ceremony. I even smirked at how absurd it was. Kelly finally got me on the phone. She must have been trying all day, and the moment I answered, she started yelling that I was selfish and had ruined her wedding. I tried to calm her down, told her I had no idea why my friends dressed that way, but she kept accusing me of jealousy and of telling them to do it just to make her wedding a joke. I felt a flicker of pity for her, but I still didn't get why she was blaming me when I hadn't been involved at all. My parents chimed in with messages too, saying they were disappointed in me and that I should have stopped my friends from behaving like that, which, of course, is absurd. I don't know whether I should explain anything to them or just let them keep blaming me. I started to wonder if maybe my friends dressed like that precisely because they knew I wasn't invited, and maybe, in some tiny way, that was on me. Perhaps I should have spelled things out better. I caught myself thinking I was to blame for my friends turning my sister's wedding into a masquerade. Before we continue, let's pause and answer the author's question in the comments. To me, the answer is obvious. She isn't at fault here. It was her friends who chose to do what they did. Are the friends to blame? That's debatable. But the idea that the author is to blame, personally, I'd say 100% no. Then again, life rarely deals in absolutes, so maybe we can hunt for that 1% of fault. Where could it be? Perhaps when she told her friends it was wrong for her sister to crash the reunion, and they took that to heart. But honestly, she was just stating her boundaries, which is not wrong. She tried to include her sister in her circle for years, and it never worked out. As for the friends, they could have simply not shown up. That probably would have been the cleaner choice. On the other hand, they wanted to support someone who had clearly been slighted, and since Kelly had once barged in uninvited, they decided this was their way of pushing back. Good or bad? Tell me what you think, and let's move on. I talked it through with Mark, and we both agreed I needed to clear the air with my family, but first I had to ask my friends for an explanation. By then, photos from Kelly's wedding had flooded social media feeds, and plenty of people already knew about the incident. I gathered my friends on a video call and asked why they had shown up dressed like that. To my surprise, one of them said it plainly. They chose those outfits as a quiet protest against Kelly's habit of inserting herself everywhere she wasn't wanted. Because the invitation didn't include a dress code, they took that opening to make a point. They admitted that, over many years, they'd grown tired of Kelly's persistent attempts to wedge herself into our circle, and that, every now and then, she'd also spoken poorly about me behind my back, something they obviously disliked. Even though they understood my parents had pushed me to drag Kelly along for years, they had still hoped she would eventually stop trying to latch on. She never did. Her crashing our reunion reminded them just how exasperating she could be, and when they learned Kelly had deliberately left me off the wedding guest list, they decided it was the perfect moment to teach her a lesson. It became clear my friends had always seen her motives for what they were and considered her more of a burden than a true friend. Their eccentric outfits at her wedding were a way to voice their frustration and give Kelly a quiet but unmistakable nudge. We are not your friends. When I told them Kelly was blaming me for the wedding fiasco, they apologized sincerely. They immediately offered to send a joint message confirming the idea had been entirely theirs, taking any suspicion whatsoever off me. I thanked them for the support and said I didn't hold the outfits against them. Yes, the choices looked strange, but I understood the years of irritation behind it. I added that what mattered most to me was for Kelly and my parents to get the message about boundaries and stop blaming me for something I didn't do. After the call, my friends wrote to Kelly in our Facebook group, explaining it had been their own idea and that I'd known nothing about it. I know Kelly read it, because instead of replying to them, she called me and started shouting that I was trying to dodge responsibility and manipulate my friends. She said her wedding was now a laughingstock in the family, and those ridiculous photos were making the rounds online. I understood why she was upset, so I kept my voice steady and explained she couldn't blame me for what my friends chose to wear to a wedding I wasn't even invited to. I told her that even after my friends had openly admitted I had nothing to do with it, if she still chose not to believe it, there was nothing else I could do. I emphasized I never intended to ruin her day. My friends were expressing their frustration with years of intrusive behavior. Despite everything I said, it was obvious Kelly wouldn't accept any version that didn't match her beliefs, so I ended the call quickly. My husband thinks our parents can help her sort it out, but I'm doubtful. I don't know whether there'll be any help, but this weekend I plan to talk with them and see if they can de-escalate the situation. A week went by. As expected, talking to my parents didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. The moment I laid everything out, the accusations came down on me. They said I should have controlled my friends, implying that those strange outfits were, in some way, my responsibility. My attempts to explain that I hadn't known about any plan went nowhere. True to form, my parents took Kelly's side, voiced their disappointment in me, and insisted I should have warned her about my friends. I was baffled and told them I hadn't been involved at all. My friends did it without telling me. But my parents, like Kelly, refused to believe it. Feeling misunderstood and increasingly frustrated, I realized fixing this with my family would be far harder than I thought. The strained relationship with Kelly and my parents' constant bias in her favor didn't leave much hope for a fair outcome. Mark came with me to that conversation and stood up for me. He told my parents that I am not the kind of person who would stab someone in the back, especially not my own sister. He said that on Kelly's wedding day we were out of town because we weren't invited, and we had no idea any of it was going to happen. He underlined how unfair it was to accuse me without a shred of proof. Mom countered that maybe I'd prompted my friends to dress that way when I told them I hadn't been invited. Mark answered that I had, in fact, told my friends I was fine with not being invited and that their choices were entirely their own. I could see my parents weren't going to budge, so I told them, if you refuse to believe me, there's no point in continuing this conversation. I also said that I had put up with my sister for years and taken care of her, but I wasn't going to be the family scapegoat anymore. I told them I'd decided to cut Kelly out of my life for good. Mom tried to argue, but Dad stopped her. We left after that, stepping back in the hope that time would cool things down and they'd eventually see the truth. Sadly, they still haven't reached out, which tells me they've chosen to stick with their version. It hurts to recognize that my parents clearly place my sister above me, even though I'm the one who always helped her. I don't know what comes next, but if they choose to back her, then so be it, even if that's disappointing. I blocked Kelly, and for now, I plan to keep it that way. 5 months have passed since then, and a lot has changed. First of all, I started therapy. Many of you suggested it. I had a lot of old wounds, and I genuinely needed to put my feelings into words and let out what had built up. Therapy changed my life. I feel lighter now. I finally know how to express myself in a healthier way, and I'm confident I did the right thing when I stood up for myself around Kelly's wedding. Over these months, my parents have tried to make contact from time to time, but instead of clarifying anything or even offering an apology for all the accusations, they acted as if nothing had happened. It didn't take me long to realize they wanted just one thing: access to my son, their only grandchild. So I cut them off completely. I don't want them to have any chance to treat my child the way they treated me. Meanwhile, Mark and I focused on our own life and leaned on each other. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Mark is a wonderful husband. He understands how hard it was to remove my parents from my life, but he has never once let me feel alone in that choice. We're planning a trip with our son for the upcoming holidays, and here's what I can offer after everything I've learned. If you have a family member who is that toxic, please, for the sake of your mental health, remove that person from your life. Don't let them poison your days. Believe me, one day you will find someone who loves you exactly as you are. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your thoughts. See you in the next video.